You wake up on the cold floor. You don't know how long you've been lying there. You don't even know exactly what day you arrived. The smell is the first shock. A mixture of urine, mold, and something you can't quite identify, but that will stick in your memory forever. You look around. Bars, stone walls, men rocking back and forth in one corner, a hunched figure in another, and the noise. A constant noise, like a collective moan that never stops. Nobody in here is interested in finding out whether you're actually crazy. But now, you've just been admitted to an asylum in the year 1890, and there is absolutely no guarantee that you will ever leave. It all starts before the bars even close behind you. You barely had time to understand what was happening when two men showed up at your door. They were asylum workers, called lunatic attendants. They didn't come gently. They came with an order signed by a doctor you had never seen in your life. In 1890, a single doctor's signature was all it took to have you committed. There was no trial, no defense, an inconvenient relative, a behavior deemed strange, a woman who defied her husband, a man who drank too much. Any of it could be reason enough. And now you're sitting inside a sealed carriage, shackles around your wrists, being taken somewhere that most people didn't even like to say out loud. The carriage stops. You're shoved out. And for the first time, you see the asylum walls up close, enormous, yellowed, covered in slime. There's an iron plaque above the entrance. You try to read it, but one of the attendants pushes you inside before you can finish. The door slams shut behind you with a heavy thud. And something inside you understands, at that exact moment, that the world you knew is on the other side of that door. You're brought into a small room. A man in a white coat sits across from you. He has round glasses and an open notebook on the table. He doesn't make eye contact when he asks questions. He writes as you answer, as if your words already have a conclusion before they even leave your mouth. He asks your name, your age, whether you hear voices, whether you've ever tried to hurt yourself. You answer calmly, clearly, with every ounce of logic you can gather. He keeps writing, and you realize, with a chill running down your spine, that it doesn't matter what you say. The pen has already decided for you. The diagnosis was written before you ever walked into this room. In 1890, so-called alienists, as psychiatrists were known at the time, believed they could identify madness simply by looking at someone. The shape of the skull, the expression on the face, the way a person walked. You are catalogued. You are given a number. And from this moment on, you are no longer a person. You are a case. They take you to the ward. The smell gets worse as you move down the corridor. The walls are coated in paint that is nearly all peeled away, revealing a dark, damp green underneath that seems almost alive. There's very little light. The windows have thick iron bars, and what filters through them is a gray, feeble light that barely reaches the floor. The ward is a large hall with mattresses on the ground. No individual beds, no privacy, nothing that resembles a bedroom. Dozens of people packed into a space that would comfortably hold half that number, and asylums in 1890 were always overcrowded. In Brazil, the Pedros II Asylum in Rio de Janeiro once housed more than 1,000 patients when it had been built for half that. One of the patients walks in circles near the wall. Another stands perfectly still, staring at the ceiling for hours. A woman in the corner repeats the same phrase over and over in a low voice, like a prayer. You sit down in a corner, and you try not to draw attention, because you already learned, in those first few minutes here, that drawing attention in this place is dangerous. The routine begins early, very early. Before sunrise, a bell rings. You have to get up, fall into line, and wait. Wait for what? You don't know yet, but you learn quickly that being slow to obey has consequences. Breakfast is served in an iron bowl. It's a dark, hot broth with a taste you can't quite place. There's a piece of stale bread beside it. You eat because you're hungry. You don't ask what it is. After breakfast comes what they call therapeutic activities. In 1890, the prevailing theory was that work cured madness. So patients who were physically able were sent to the garden, the laundry, the kitchen. They worked for hours, without pay, without choice. It was called moral treatment, an idea from the previous century that was still very much alive within these walls. You go to the garden. You dig, you haul buckets, you bend your back under the sun, and while you work, you look around and think, this isn't a hospital. This is a farm with bars. The word treatment here means something very different from what you knew on the outside. When the doctor appears, and he doesn't appear every day, he walks through the hall the way someone inspects a warehouse. He stops in front of a few patients, takes notes. He rarely speaks directly to anyone, but there are days when they call your name. And those are the days you learn to dread. In 1890, treatments included full-body immersion in ice-cold water, called shock baths. The theory was that the cold rebalanced the nervous system. You are taken to a tiled room, stripped, and plunged into a tank of water that feels like it came from the bottom of a winter river. You don't scream, because screaming only makes things worse. There is also the rotating chair, a device in which you were strapped down and spun at high speed until you vomited or passed out. Doctors believe this reorganized the brain. There are real records of this. It actually happened. And then there are the isolation cells. You can see the doors from the corridor, a row of heavy wooden doors, each with a small opening at the bottom to slide food through. When someone becomes agitated, when someone screams, cries, resists, the attendants drag that person down there. Sometimes at night, you hear sounds coming from behind those doors. You pretend not to hear. With time, you begin to know the other patients. And this is where reality starts to weigh heavier than any bar or chain. There's the woman who was committed by her husband because she kept insisting on wanting to work outside the home. In 1890, that could be diagnosed as hysteria. She is lucid, intelligent, and knows exactly why she's here, but knowing doesn't change a thing. There's the young man who was brought in by his family because he fell in love with someone they didn't approve of. He barely speaks anymore. He became that way after his first few weeks inside. There's the old man who genuinely seems confused, who doesn't know his own name, who sometimes cries for no reason. He's the only one you can't quite figure out, whether he belongs here or not. And then there's you, still telling yourself you're not crazy, that this will end, that someone will show up and correct this mistake. But the weeks pass, and nobody shows up. The night is the hardest part. The light disappears almost without warning. The attendants lock the outer doors and retreat to their own wing, where there's a heated room and better food. You know this because you've smelled it when you walked past. You're left there in the dark with dozens of people you barely know. The sounds of the night are different from the sounds of the day. During the day, there's movement, predictable noise. At night, the sounds are more intimate and more disturbing. Heavy breathing, someone crying softly without stopping, footsteps circling in the dark with no destination. You learn to sleep on your side, facing the wall. Not because it's more comfortable, but because that way you don't have to see. There comes a moment, and you can't pinpoint exactly when it was, when you stop trying to explain that you're fine. Because every time you explain, they take notes. And every time they take notes, you stay a little longer. You learn to speak less, to obey faster, to stop asking questions, to never show anger. Because anger here is a symptom. To never show sadness. Because sadness here is a symptom too. And one day, you catch your reflection in the smeared glass of a barred window, and you think, do I even know anymore exactly who I was before I came in here? That is the most frightening thing of all. Not the bars, not the treatments, not the cold. It's realizing that a place like this, given enough time, can make you start to doubt yourself. In 1890, thousands of people lived exactly this. Not fictional characters, not isolated cases. Real people, men, women, young and old, who were taken from their homes, cataloged with a number, and placed inside walls like these. Many of them never left, not because they got worse, but because there was no legal process that guaranteed their release. Once committed, you depended entirely on someone on the outside to come and get you out, and if no one came looking for you, the bars stayed. The next time you walk past an old building, thick walls, small windows set high, the kind of place that feels like it's holding its breath, think about this. Think about the people who were on the inside of those windows, looking out, waiting for someone who never came. Thank you for watching another video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you in the next one.